This story that seemed impossible actually happened to me. I was so shocked when it happened. Let me tell you about it. Come along with me as we begin. I am 32 years old, living in Boston, working in commercial real estate. But here is the thing. I drive an old Honda Civic. I wear simple clothes. Nobody would ever guess what I actually have. And that night, when I walked into my fiancé's family mansion, they saw exactly what I wanted them to see. A poor, naive girl. They called me a gold digger right to my face. They laughed at me. They offered me money to disappear. But what they did not know changed everything. Before I take you into that dining room where my whole life shifted, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you have ever been judged unfairly by people who thought they were better than you, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Trust me, you do not want to miss a single moment of what happened next. Let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a small town called Millbrook, New Hampshire. It was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, where neighbors borrowed sugar and returned it with homemade cookies, where the biggest excitement was the annual fall festival. My childhood home was a modest two-story house with a wraparound porch and a backyard that seemed to stretch forever when I was little. My father, Harold Whitmore, was a quiet man with calloused hands and a gentle smile. He started his career buying run-down houses, fixing them up with his own two hands, and renting them out to families who needed affordable housing. This was back in the 1970s, when real estate was not the glamorous industry it is today. He would come home covered in sawdust and paint, smelling like hard work and determination. My mother, Catherine, was a schoolteacher who believed that kindness was the most valuable currency in the world. She taught me how to read before I started kindergarten, how to bake apple pie from scratch, and most importantly, how to treat every person I met with respect, regardless of their background. Together, they raised me with a simple philosophy. Money does not define who you are. How you treat people when nobody is watching, that is what matters. I did not realize how successful my father had become until I was in my early 20s. He never talked about business at the dinner table. He never bragged about his acquisitions. To me, he was just Dad, the man who taught me how to ride a bike and helped me with my homework and made the best grilled cheese sandwiches in all of New England. When I was 25 years old, my father had a heart attack. It happened on a Tuesday morning, just an ordinary day that turned into the worst day of my life. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. The doctors said it was quick that he did not suffer, but that did not make it any easier. The weeks after his funeral were a blur of grief and paperwork. And that is when I discovered the truth about my father's quiet empire. His attorneys sat me down in a conference room with mahogany walls and leather chairs that smelled like old money. He slid a thick folder across the table and told me to take my time reading through it. Inside that folder was a detailed inventory of everything my father had built over 40 years. Commercial buildings in Boston, Providence, and Hartford. Apartment complexes in 3 states. Retail spaces, office buildings, and undeveloped land that stretched across the Northeast. The total value was just over $80 million, and every single asset was now mine. I remember sitting in that conference room for a long time after the attorney left. I just stared at the numbers on those pages, trying to reconcile them with the father I knew. The man who wore flannel shirts and drove a pickup truck. The man who fixed leaky faucets himself instead of calling a plumber. The man who taught me that the best things in life have nothing to do with money. After the shock wore off, I made a decision. I would not let this inheritance change who I was. I would continue living simply driving my old car, wearing clothes from regular stores. I had seen what money did to people. I had watched childhood friends transform when they came into wealth, becoming shallow and suspicious and surrounded by fake relationships. I wanted something real. I wanted someone who would love me for who I was, not for my bank account. and that meant keeping my financial situation private. For 7 years, that strategy worked perfectly. I dated casually, never getting serious enough for the money question to become relevant. I built a quiet life that made me happy. And then I met Marcus. It was a rainy afternoon in Cambridge. I had ducked into a small coffee shop to escape the downpour, shaking water from my hair and scanning the crowded room for an empty seat. That is when I spotted him at a corner table reading a thick book about architecture, completely absorbed in its pages. The only available chair was at his table, so I asked if he minded sharing the space. He looked up with warm brown eyes and a smile that made my heart skip and said he would be delighted to have company. We talked for 3 hours that day. He was 35, working as a financial consultant at a firm in Boston. He came from a family in Connecticut, old money types, he said, with a slight eye roll that I found endearing. His name was Marcus Wellington, and by the time the rain stopped, I knew I wanted to see him again. Our relationship developed slowly, beautifully. He was attentive and funny, and genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions. He asked about my work, and I told him I was in real estate, which was technically true. I just left out the part about being a multi-millionaire property owner. He assumed I was an agent, or maybe an office manager, and I never corrected him. For 18 months, we built something that felt solid and real. He never asked about my finances. He insisted on paying for dates, even though I could have bought the restaurants we ate at. He loved me in my simple dresses and minimal makeup. Or so I thought. When Marcus proposed on a beach in Cape Cod at sunset, I said yes, with tears in my eyes and joy in my heart. I believed I had found my person, the one who saw me for exactly who I was. A few weeks later, Marcus brought up meeting his family. They were hosting Thanksgiving at the family estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, and he wanted to introduce me as his fiancé. I was nervous, but excited. This was the next step in our life together. The night before I was supposed to make that 3-hour drive, I stood in my closet for a long time. Should I tell Marcus the truth about my financial situation? Should I show up in designer clothes and expensive jewelry, revealing myself as someone his family would consider an equal? In the end, I chose to go as myself. Simple dress from a department store. No fancy accessories. My old Honda Civic, instead of the luxury car I could easily afford. I wanted to see how his family would treat me when they thought I had nothing. I wanted to know what kind of people they really were. Looking back, that decision was either the smartest or the most reckless thing I have ever done. But I needed to know the truth. And the only way to find truth is to create a situation where people feel comfortable showing their real faces. I had no idea how ugly those faces would turn out to be. The drive from Boston to Greenwich took a little over 3 hours. I left early, wanting to arrive before dark, watching the scenery change from urban sprawl to increasingly affluent suburbs. The houses got bigger. The lawns got greener. The cars in the driveways got more expensive. When I turned onto the road that led to the Wellington estate, I felt my stomach tighten. The neighborhood was the kind of place you see in movies about old money families. Ancient oak trees lined the streets like sentries. Massive gates protected properties that you could not even see from the road. The GPS directed me to a wrought iron gate flanked by stone pillars. I pressed the intercom button and gave my name. The gate swung open, slowly revealing a long driveway paved with white gravel that crunched under my tires. And there it was, the Wellington Mansion. It was a Georgian colonial red brick with white, trim, symmetrical windows and a grand entrance with columns that seemed designed to make visitors feel small. The front lawn was manicured within an inch of its life, not a single blade of grass out of place. A fountain in the circular driveway featured some kind of classical statue that I did not recognize. I parked my Honda Civic next to a row of vehicles that probably cost more than most people make in 5 years. 3 Mercedes-Benz sedans, a Porsche, a Range Rover. My car looked like it had wandered into the wrong neighborhood and was too embarrassed to leave. As I got out, I caught a glimpse of myself in the side mirror. Simple navy blue dress, hair pulled back in a low ponytail, minimal makeup, flat shoes because I had never mastered walking in heels. I looked exactly like what the Wellingtons would expect from a girl who did not belong in their world. Marcus appeared at the front door before I reached the steps. He bounded down to meet me, pulling me into a hug that should have been reassuring but felt slightly off. His eyes kept darting toward the house like he was worried about something. Before I could ask what was wrong, she appeared. Constance Wellington. Marcus had shown me photos, but they had not captured the full effect of her presence. She was 62 years old, with silver hair cut in a perfect bob, wearing a Chanel dress in navy blue that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. A string of pearls hung around her neck, the kind that had probably been in the family for generations. Her posture was impeccable, her expression cool and appraising. She descended the front steps, slowly, deliberately, like a queen approaching a peasant who had wandered into the throne room. Her eyes travelled over me from head to toe, missing nothing. The department store dress, the drugstore mascara, the practical shoes. I watched her catalogue each detail and find it wanting. The corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile, more like the beginning of a sneer that she was too well bred to fully express. She extended her hand, and I took it. Her grip was brief and cold. So this is the girl Marcus has been hiding from us. She paused, letting the word hiding land like an accusation. How interesting. I smiled and thanked her for having me, but she had already turned away, heading back into the house without waiting to see if I followed. Marcus squeezed my hand and whispered that his mother was just being protective. I wanted to believe him. Inside the house was exactly what you would expect. Antique furniture that looked too valuable to sit on. Oil paintings in gilded frames. A crystal chandelier the size of a small car. Fresh flowers in expensive vases, even though it was late November, and those flowers must have cost a fortune to source. Theodore Wellington was waiting in the sitting room. Marcus had described his father as distinguished, but up close, the man just looked tired and irritated. He was 70 years old, tall and thin, with silver hair combed back severely from his forehead. He wore a full suit, despite being at home complete with a silk pocket square and polished wingtips. When I entered the room, he did not stand up. He barely glanced up from his copy of the Wall Street Journal. A slight nod in my direction was the only acknowledgement I received. Marcus introduced me, and Theodore finally lowered his newspaper, just enough to look at me over the top of his reading glasses. "What did you say your father does, dear?" I explained that my father had passed away several years ago. Theodore made a small sound, somewhere between acknowledgement and dismissal. Then he returned to his newspaper, as if I had already ceased to exist. The next arrival was worse. Priscilla Wellington swept into the room like a thunderstorm in designer clothing. She was 38. Marcus had told me divorced twice, living in a Manhattan penthouse that their parents had purchased for her after her second marriage fell apart. She was tall and angular, with the kind of thinness that comes from obsessive dieting and the kind of style that comes from unlimited credit cards. She carried a Birkin bag in one hand and a glass of white wine in the other. When she saw me, she stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes going wide with theatrical surprise. "Oh my!" She turned to Marcus with an expression of exaggerated confusion. "You are not joking. She actually exists." Before Marcus could respond, Priscilla approached me, circling slowly like a predator assessing prey. Her gaze was sharp and dismissive. "That dress is so vintage." She drew out the word vintage like it was an insult. Where on earth did you find it? A thrift store. She laughed high and tinkling and looked at her mother for approval. Constance smiled thinly and sipped her cocktail. The final member of the family arrived shortly after. Garrett Wellington was 28, the baby of the family, and apparently unemployed by choice. He wandered in, wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. His hair artfully messy in that way that takes expensive products and considerable effort to achieve. He looked me up and down with undisguised contempt, then sidled up to Priscilla and stage whispered something that I was clearly meant to hear. Marcus really scraped the bottom of the barrel this time. They both laughed. Constance pretended not to hear. Theodore turned a page of his newspaper. And Marcus, my fiancé, the man who had promised to love and protect me. He stood there with an awkward smile, shuffling his feet like a teenager caught in an uncomfortable situation. Come on, he said weakly. Everyone is just joking around. I looked at him, searching his face for some sign of the man I had fallen in love with. Some indication that he would stand up for me, defend me, tell his family that their behavior was unacceptable. But all I saw was a little boy trying not to upset Mommy and Daddy. That was the first moment I knew something was deeply wrong. Dinner was served in a formal dining room that looked like it belonged in a museum. A table long enough to seat 20 dominated the space, though only 6 places were set at one end. Crystal glasses, sterling silver flatware, china so delicate I was afraid to touch it. I was seated between Marcus and an empty chair facing Priscilla and Garrett across the table. Constance presided at the head with Theodore at the opposite end, still clutching his newspaper like a security blanket. The first course was some kind of soup that I could not identify. It was cold and green and tasted like lawn clippings with a hint of cream. Everyone else seemed to find it delicious, so I ate it without comment. The interrogation began before the second course arrived. Constance set down her spoon and fixed me with a look that made me feel like a specimen under a microscope. So Yetta. She said my name like she was testing whether it would leave a bad taste in her mouth. Tell us about yourself. Marcus has been remarkably vague about your background. I explained that I worked in real estate, lived in a small apartment in Boston, and had grown up in a small town in New Hampshire. Real estate. Priscilla repeated the words with a smirk. How interesting. Are you an agent? I said something non-committal about being involved in the business side of things. And your family, Constance pressed. What do your parents do? Again? I explained that both my parents had passed away. My mother 10 years ago from cancer. My father 5 years later from heart disease. Constance nodded slowly, but there was no sympathy in her eyes. So you have no family connections? No inheritance to speak of? No notable relatives? It was not a question. It was a verdict. The main course arrived. Some kind of elaborate roast with vegetables that had been carved into identical shapes. I tried to focus on eating, but every bite felt like it was going down wrong. Let me be frank with you, dear. Constance's voice cut through the silence. She had set down her knife and fork and was looking at me with an expression that was almost pitying. Almost. Our family has a certain standard. The Wellingtons have been prominent in Connecticut society for 5 generations. We cannot have just anyone marrying into this family. The words hung in the air like a slap. I felt my face grow hot. My hands trembled slightly as I set down my own utensils. I looked at Marcus, desperate for him to say something to defend me, to stand up to his mother. He was staring at his plate like it contained the secrets of the universe. Priscilla leaned forward, her eyes bright with malicious excitement. Mother, let us just call it what it is. She is a gold digger. Look at her. She drives a beat-up car, She wears cheap clothes. And suddenly she is engaged to Marcus Please. It is so obvious what is happening here. Garrett chimed in with a laugh that made my skin crawl. Classic gold digger move. Find a rich guy, play innocent, trap him with an engagement before he realizes what is happening. I could not believe what I was hearing. These people had known me for less than 2 hours, and they had already decided exactly who I was and what I wanted. They had not asked about my education, my interests, my values. They had taken one look at my simple clothes and old car and concluded that I was nothing more than a fortune hunter. Marcus. I said his name quietly, but firmly. Are you going to say something? He finally looked up from his plate. His face was flushed, and he could not quite meet my eyes. Maybe we should discuss this later. In private. Priscilla rolled her eyes so hard, I thought they might get stuck. Oh, Marcus, do not be so weak. Just tell her the truth. You were only dating her because she was easy and uncomplicated. But marriage. That is a different story. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. The air left my lungs. The room seemed to spin. And then Theodore spoke. He had been silent throughout the meal, seemingly absorbed in his food and his newspaper. But now he reached into his jacket pocket and produced something that made my blood run cold. A check. Already filled out and signed. Young lady? His voice was cold and businesslike. I am a practical man. I do not enjoy these kinds of scenes, and I do not wish to drag this out any longer than necessary. So let me make you an offer. He slid the check across the table toward me. $50,000. I will give you this money right now if you walk away from my son and never contact him again. This is more than generous for someone in your situation. The number stared up at me from the check. $50,000. To them it was nothing. Pocket change. A small price to pay to get rid of an unwanted problem. I looked around the table at their faces. Constance satisfied and superior. Priscilla smug and triumphant. Garrett bored and contemptuous. Theodore cold and impatient. And Marcus, my fiancé, the man I had agreed to marry, sitting there in silence, waiting to see what I would do. Not one of them spoke up for me. Not one of them questioned whether this was wrong. Not one of them seemed to care that they were treating another human being like garbage to be disposed of. I think you should leave now, dear. Constance's voice was almost gentle, almost kind, like she was doing me a favor by dismissing me before things got any more embarrassing. This dinner is for family only, and clearly you are not family material. I stood up from the table. My legs felt like jelly, but somehow they held me. I did not take the check. I did not say anything. I just turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving the sound of their relieved laughter behind me. In the hallway, away from their eyes, I finally let myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. The humiliation, the injustice, the casual cruelty of people who had decided I was worthless before I even opened my mouth. I stood there among the antique furniture and expensive art, breathing hard, trying to collect myself. And that is when something caught my eye. A painting on the wall, a landscape of rolling hills and a farmhouse. It was familiar, though I could not immediately place why. Then it hit me. That painting had been in my father's office. He had sold it years ago when he was downsizing his collection. And now, here it was, hanging in the Wellington mansion. A strange feeling crept over me. I pulled out my phone and opened the property management app I used to track my real estate holdings. With trembling fingers, I typed in the address of this mansion. The result that appeared made my heart stop. The Wellington mansion. The 4.2-acre estate. The Georgian colonial with its grand columns and manicured lawns. It was all mine. My father had purchased this property in 1992. He had been renting it out through a management company ever since. And according to my records, the current tenants were 3 months behind on their rent. The Wellingtons did not own this house. They were just renters who were behind on their payments. To me, I stood in that hallway for what felt like hours, though it was probably only a few minutes. My mind raced as I scrolled through my property records, searching for more information, trying to understand the full scope of what I had just discovered. The results were staggering. That office building in Boston where Marcus worked, the one where he spent his days as a financial consultant, probably feeling very important about his career. It was part of a commercial complex that my father had acquired in 2003. When my father died, ownership transferred to me. Marcus had been paying rent to my company every single day without knowing it. Priscilla's precious penthouse in Manhattan, the one she flaunted so proudly, the symbol of her sophisticated urban lifestyle. It was located in a luxury high-rise development that I had invested in 4 years ago. I owned 40% of that building, and that exclusive golf club the Wellingtons were so proud of belonging to, the one they mentioned during every social gathering as proof of their elevated status. It had been built on land that my father purchased over 30 years ago. The club paid my company a ground lease every month. The Wellingtons were not wealthy. They were pretenders. They had the appearance of money, the trappings of old-world prestige, but the foundation of their lifestyle was built on my family's actual wealth. The irony was almost too much to process. These people who had called me a gold digger, who had offered me $50,000 to disappear, who had dismissed me as unworthy of their precious family, they were living in my house, working in my building, playing golf on my land, and they owed me money. I closed the property app and took a deep breath. My hands had stopped shaking. The humiliation I had felt was transforming into something else, something colder, something more powerful. I had 2 choices. I could walk out of this house, get in my car, and drive back to Boston. I could end things quietly, let Marcus figure out the truth on his own, and move on with my life. Or I could walk back into that dining room and show them exactly who they had been mocking all evening. The old me. The me who had spent years hiding my wealth to avoid exactly this kind of confrontation would have chosen the first option. But something had shifted inside me during that terrible dinner. These people had stripped away my dignity without a second thought. They had judged me based on appearances and found me wanting. They had tried to buy me off like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. They deserved to know the truth. I straightened my simple department store dress, tucked my phone back into my purse, and walked back toward the dining room. When I pushed open the door, conversation stopped. 4 pairs of eyes turned toward me with varying degrees of surprise and annoyance. Oh. Constance set down her wineglass with an exasperated sigh. I thought you had left. I smiled. It was not a warm smile. Not yet, Mrs. Wellington. I have a few things I would like to say first. Priscilla snorted. What could you possibly have to say that would interest any of us? I walked slowly back to my seat, but I did not sit down. Instead, I stood behind the chair, my hands resting on its back, surveying the table like a CEO addressing a boardroom. Before I respond to your generous offer, Mr. Wellington, I have a question for you. How long have you been living in this house? Theodore looked up from his check, irritation flickering across his features. That is none of your business. This house has been in our family for decades. I let the silence stretch for a moment before I responded. Actually, it is very much my business, because I own this house. The effect was instantaneous and delicious. Constance's wineglass froze halfway to her lips. Priscilla's smug expression curdled into confusion. Garrett sat up straight for the first time all evening. Even Theodore, the unflappable patriarch, went pale. What kind of ridiculous joke is this? Constance's voice had lost some of its polish. She is lying. Priscilla spat the words. She is just trying to embarrass us because we caught her in her little scheme. This is insane. Garrett pushed back from the table. Marcus, get your crazy girlfriend out of here. But Marcus was not moving. He was staring at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was the look of someone who was realizing they did not know the person in front of them at all. I took out my phone, unlocked it, and walked around the table to where Theodore sat. This property, along with 4.2 acres of land, was purchased by my father, Harold Whitmore, in 1992. Upon his passing, ownership transferred to me. Your family has been renting this property for the past 18 years. I held out the phone so he could see the screen, the property records, the ownership documents, my name in clear black letters, and according to these records, you are currently 3 months behind on rent. Theodore's hand trembled as he took the phone. His face had gone from pale to ashen. He scrolled through the documents, his jaw tightening with each swipe. Theodore. Constance's voice was sharp with fear. What is she talking about? But Theodore could not answer. He just kept staring at the screen, at the irrefutable evidence of a truth he had apparently been hiding from his own family. Let me be clear about what this means. I spoke calmly, evenly, like I was discussing the weather, rather than dismantling their entire self-image. You do not own this house. You never did. You have been renting it from my family for nearly 2 decades, and right now, you are behind on your payments. The silence in the room was absolute. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And that is not all. I retrieved my phone from Theodore's limp hand and continued scrolling. That penthouse in Manhattan, Priscilla. The one you are so proud of. It is in a building I partially own. Marcus, the office where you work every day. My company owns that building too. And that golf club your family brags about belonging to. It was built on land my father purchased over 30 years ago. I looked around the table at their stricken faces. You called me a gold digger. You offered me money to disappear. You decided I was not good enough for your precious family. But the truth is, you have been living off my family's money for years. The Wellingtons are not wealthy. You just play the part. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the ticking of an antique clock on the mantel, counting out seconds that felt like hours. Then everyone started talking at once. This cannot be right. Constance's voice had risen to an undignified shriek. Theodore, tell me this is some kind of mistake. Theodore said nothing. He was still staring at the table, looking like a man whose entire world had just collapsed. She is making this up. Priscilla was on her feet, her perfectly manicured hands balled into fists. She must have faked those documents somehow. Gold diggers are clever that way. I remained calm. It is easy to remain calm when you are holding all the cards. Feel free to verify the information, Priscilla. Property records are public. You can look them up yourself. Or you could call your family's accountant. I am sure he will be happy to confirm everything I have said. Priscilla grabbed her phone, her fingers flying over the screen. After a few minutes of searching, her face went white. She sank back into her chair without a word. Garrett was the next to break. His earlier bravado had completely evaporated. Wait. He held up his hands like he was trying to stop traffic. So you are telling me that you are actually richer than us? I tilted my head, considering the question. Wealth is relative, Garrett. But yes, significantly richer than your family. My father spent 40 years building a real estate portfolio. He did it quietly without fanfare because he believed that true success does not need to be advertised. When he passed away, I inherited everything. But you drive that terrible car. Constance seemed personally offended by this detail. You wear those cheap clothes. I shrugged. I like my car. It gets good gas mileage. And my clothes are comfortable. I do not need designer labels to feel good about myself. Then why pretend to be poor Marcus finally found his voice? It was hoarse, confused, tinged with something that might have been betrayal. Why hide all this from me? From everyone I turned to face him directly. It was time for him to hear the truth. Because I wanted to know if you would love me for who I am, not for what I have. I wanted to see how your family would treat me when they thought I was ordinary, when they thought I had nothing to offer except myself. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. And tonight, I got my answer. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He looked like a fish gasping for air. Yetta, He swallowed hard. I did not know. If I had known, if you had known what I interrupted, you would have defended me. You would have told your mother to stop insulting me. You would have stood up for the woman you claimed to love. He had no response to that. Marcus, they called me a gold digger. They offered me money to leave. They said I was not family material. And you sat there in silence. You watched them humiliate me and you did nothing. I reached down and took his hand. For a moment he looked hopeful. Then I slid the engagement ring off my finger and placed it in his palm. I do not need your family's money or status. I never did. What I needed was respect, loyalty, love. And clearly those are things you cannot give me. The ring sat in his open hand, glittering under the chandelier light. He stared at it like he could not understand what it was. Yetta, please. His voice cracked. I love you. I made a mistake. I did not know how to handle the situation. A mistake, I shook my head sadly. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is being late to dinner. Sitting in silence while your family tears apart someone you supposedly love. That is not a mistake. That is a choice. And you made your choice very clear tonight. I stepped back from the table and addressed the room. Mr. Wellington, about the overdue rent. I was planning to be lenient. I did not realize who the tenants were, and my company has a policy of working with people who are going through financial difficulties. I let those words land before continuing. But after tonight, I am not feeling particularly generous. You have 30 days to pay the full amount owed, plus a 10% late fee. If the payment is not received, my legal team will begin eviction proceedings. You cannot do this. Theodore's voice was thin and reedy. We have been in this house for nearly 20 years. And you have been in my house for nearly 20 years. I corrected him. Paying my mortgage, maintaining my property, building equity for me. I have been more than fair. But respect is a two-way street, and tonight your family showed me none. I picked up my purse and took one last look around the room. I came here tonight hoping to find a family. Instead, I found people who judge others based on appearances and bank accounts. My father taught me that true wealth is measured by how you treat people. By that measure, the Wellingtons are the poorest people I have ever met. I walked toward the door, then paused. One more thing. That check for $50,000, I did not take it because it would have been an insult, but also because it would have been ridiculous for me to accept money from tenants who already owe me $60,000 in back rent. And with that, I left the dining room, my head held high, my dignity intact. I did not look back. The drive back to Boston felt different from the drive down. 3 hours ago, I had been nervous and hopeful, excited to meet my future family. Now I was alone, single, and oddly at peace. The engagement was over. The fantasy I had built about Marcus and our future together had shattered. But as I drove through the night, watching the lights of Connecticut fade in my rearview mirror, I realized something important. I had not lost anything real tonight. I had lost an illusion. The Marcus I thought I knew, the one who was kind and thoughtful, and would always have my back, that Marcus had never existed. The real Marcus was the man who sat silently while his family destroyed me. The real Marcus was someone who valued his parents' approval more than his partner's dignity. Better to find that out before the wedding than after. When I got home, I cancelled all the wedding arrangements, the venue, the caterer, the florist. I called my friends to tell them what had happened, and they rallied around me with support and outrage and offers of wine and chocolate. For the first week, Marcus called constantly. I did not answer. His voicemails ranged from apologetic to desperate to angry and back to apologetic. He texted walls of excuses and explanations. He sent flowers that I donated to a nursing home. After 3 days, I blocked his number. The Wellington family also attempted to make contact. Constance sent a handwritten letter on expensive stationery. It was framed as an apology, but reading between the lines, it was really a request for leniency on the rent situation. She wrote about family traditions and misunderstandings, and how she was sure we could work something out. The letter never actually said the words, "I am sorry for how I treated you." It was all about what I could do for them, not about what they had done wrong. I filed the letter without responding. Priscilla called my office, somehow having tracked down my work number. She was crying, or at least pretending to cry, begging me not to remove her from the penthouse. She promised we could be friends. She said she had always liked me, that she had only been testing me at dinner, that she had not really meant those terrible things. I instructed my assistant to block her number. The most pathetic attempt came from Garrett. He found my personal email and sent me a message that was apparently supposed to be flirtatious. He wrote about how he had always been attracted to me, how Marcus did not deserve someone so amazing, how he would treat me so much better than his brother ever could. I forwarded the email to Marcus without comment, and then blocked Garrett too. 2 weeks after that disastrous dinner, there was a knock at my apartment door. I opened it to find Marcus standing in the hallway. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, unshaven, clothes wrinkled like he had slept in them. "Please." His voice was raw. "Just let me explain." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let him in. He sat on my couch and launched into a speech he had obviously rehearsed. He was sorry. He had been wrong. He had not realized how badly his family was behaving until I left. He loved me. He had always loved me. He would stand up for me from now on. He would cut ties with his family if that was what I wanted. He would do anything at all to get me back. I listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, he looked at me with hopeful, desperate eyes. I took a deep breath before responding. Marcus, love is not just words. It is action. It is standing up for someone when it is hard, not just when it is convenient. You had your chance to show me who you really are. And you did. But I can change. He grabbed my hands, squeezing too tight. I will change. I promise. Maybe you will. I gently pulled my hands free. But not for me. I deserve someone who does not need a wake-up call to treat me with basic respect. Yetta, please. I stood up and walked to the door. I think you should go now. And please do not contact me again. He sat there for a long moment, and I could see him struggling with whether to keep fighting or accept defeat. Finally, his shoulders slumped. He stood up slowly like an old man and shuffled toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. I really did love you, Yetta. I nodded. I believe you did. But not enough. And not in the way I deserved. I closed the door behind him and locked it. Then I sat down on my couch, took a deep breath, and cried for the first time since that terrible dinner. Not because I missed him, not because I regretted my decision, but because I was finally letting go of the future I had imagined with him. It hurt, but it was also a relief. Over the following months, I heard bits and pieces about what happened to the Wellingtons. They paid the back rent, though just barely scraping together the money, by selling several valuable pieces of art from the mansion. My property manager reported that they were now paying on time each month, which suggested they had finally learned to live within their means. Priscilla moved out of the Manhattan penthouse. Apparently, she could not afford it without a significant subsidy from her parents, and that subsidy was no longer available. Last I heard, she was sharing an apartment in Queens with a former college friend. Garrett got a job, an actual job with a regular paycheck and working hours, and a boss who expected him to show up every day. The details were unclear, but someone mentioned it was something in sales. For a man who had never worked a day in his life, it was probably a shock to the system. Theodore and Constance remained in the mansion, but their social standing had taken a hit. Word had gotten around Greenwich about what happened at that Thanksgiving dinner. Not from me. I never spoke publicly about it. But in communities like that, gossip travels fast. The Wellingtons were no longer invited to the most exclusive events. Their name had lost some of its shine. And Marcus I never saw him again after that day in my apartment. I heard through mutual friends that he threw himself into work, became quieter and more withdrawn. Whether he ever truly changed, I do not know. That is no longer my concern. The first few months after the breakup were hard. I had genuinely loved Marcus. Our relationship had felt real to me, and its ending left a hole in my life that I did not know how to fill. I spent a lot of evenings alone in my apartment, questioning myself. Had I been too harsh? Should I have given him another chance? Was I being unreasonable in my expectations? Eventually, I decided to see a therapist. Not because I was falling apart, but because I was wise enough to know that processing a painful experience with professional help is a sign of strength, not weakness. My therapist, Dr. Elaine Morrison, was a calm woman in her 50s, with a warm smile and an endless supply of patience. She helped me work through not just the breakup, but the deeper issues it had exposed. My tendency to hide parts of myself to be accepted. My fear that people would only value me for my money. My difficulty trusting others with my whole truth. We met weekly for 6 months. It was some of the most valuable time I have ever spent. I also reconnected with friends I had neglected during my relationship with Marcus. When you are in love, it is easy to let friendships slip. But my old friends welcomed me back without judgment. We had dinner parties and movie nights and long walks through the city. I remembered what it felt like to have a community that supported me unconditionally. Work became a source of satisfaction rather than just a responsibility. I got more involved in the day-to-day operations of my real estate business, learning aspects of the industry that I had previously left to managers and accountants. I discovered that I had a talent for identifying promising properties and negotiating deals. My father would have been proud. I also started volunteering at a women's shelter in Boston. Once a week, I helped residents with job applications, interview skills, and financial planning. Many of these women were starting over after leaving abusive relationships or difficult circumstances. Hearing their stories put my own troubles in perspective. One woman, a former paralegal named Sandra, told me something I will never forget. She said that the hardest part of leaving her situation was not the fear or the uncertainty. It was the moment when she had to stop believing in the story she had been telling herself about her life. She had to accept that the future she had imagined was never going to happen, and she had to grieve for that imaginary future before she could build a real one. That is exactly how I felt about Marcus. I had to mourn the relationship that never was before I could appreciate the life I actually had. Slowly, without me even noticing at first, I started to feel lighter. The weight of expectation and disappointment lifted from my shoulders. I stopped replaying that dinner in my head. I stopped wondering what I could have done differently. I stopped caring what the Wellingtons thought of me. I found peace. About a year after that fateful Thanksgiving, I attended a charity gala for an organization that supports underprivileged students pursuing higher education. It was the kind of event I used to avoid, too many rich people showing off their wealth, but I had become a donor and felt obligated to make an appearance. I was standing near the silent auction items, pretending to be interested in a weekend getaway package, when a man beside me struck up a conversation. His name was Daniel. He was a high school teacher in a public school in Dorchester, one of the tougher neighborhoods in Boston. He was at the gala because several of his students had received scholarships from the organization, and he wanted to thank the donors personally. We talked for 2 hours about education, about economic inequality, about our families and our values and what we wanted from life. He made me laugh. He listened when I spoke. He did not once ask what I did for a living or try to impress me with his own accomplishments. When the gala ended, he asked if he could take me out for coffee sometime. Not to a fancy restaurant, not to an exclusive club, just coffee. I said yes. As we exchanged phone numbers, I noticed his car keys. They had a worn Toyota logo on them. His car was probably older than my Honda Civic. On our first date, he picked me up in that old Toyota. The paint was faded, the seats were a little worn, but it was clean and well maintained. He opened my door for me and apologized for not having a nicer car. I told him I actually preferred practical vehicles. He laughed and said that was a relief. Over the following weeks, we saw each other regularly. Daniel was warm and genuine and completely uninterested in wealth or status. His passion was teaching. His joy came from watching his students succeed. He talked about former students who had gone on to college, to careers, to lives they never thought possible. His eyes lit up when he described their achievements like they were his own children. He never asked about my financial situation. He paid for our dates because he insisted, even though I could have bought the restaurants. When I finally told him, after several months of dating, that I was significantly wealthier than he probably realized, he was surprised, but not uncomfortable. "Does this change things?" I asked, bracing for disappointment. He thought about it for a moment. Then he shook his head. "You are still you, the woman who cares about helping others, who volunteers at the shelter, who gets excited about a good book, who makes terrible puns that I pretend not to enjoy. The money does not change any of that." He paused. "But I am still paying for our dates." I laughed, and I knew in that moment that I had found something real. Looking back on everything that happened from that terrible dinner in Greenwich to the peace I have now found, I am genuinely grateful for the experience. Not for the pain. Nobody should be grateful for pain, but for the clarity it brought me. That night at the Wellington Mansion taught me something I will never forget. The people who truly love you will never make you feel small, and the ones who try to diminish you are only revealing their own insecurities. My father was right all along. True wealth has nothing to do with money. It is measured in kindness, in integrity, in the way you treat people when you think no one is watching. The Wellingtons had every material advantage, but were emotionally bankrupt. They lived in a beautiful house that they did not own, surrounded by expensive things that did not make them happy, obsessed with status that brought them no peace. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but my richest moments have nothing to do with that. They are the evenings with Daniel grading papers together on his couch. They are the phone calls with friends who knew me before and after who love me the same either way. They are the moments at the shelter when a woman lands a job interview and her face lights up with hope. So here is my message to anyone who has ever been made to feel not good enough. Your worth is not determined by other people's opinions. It is not measured by your clothes or your car or your bank account. It is determined by how you treat yourself and others. It is reflected in the choices you make when nobody is watching. It is proven through your actions, not your possessions. And sometimes the best response to cruelty is simply living well and letting go. I do not hate the Wellingtons. I do not wish them harm. I have simply released them from my life and my thoughts. They have no power over me anymore. I am free. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it touched your heart in any way, I would love to hear from you. Have you ever been judged unfairly by people who did not know your real story? Have you ever had to walk away from a situation that felt impossible? Share your experience in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories inspire me more than you know. If this video resonated with you, please hit that like button. It really does help more people find these stories and connect with each other. And if you have not already subscribed to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. I share experiences like this one regularly, real-life moments of challenge and triumph and everything in between. Also, if you know someone who might need to hear this message today, someone who is questioning their worth or facing judgment from others, please share this video with them. Sometimes a story at the right moment can change everything. Thank you again for being here. Take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, you are enough exactly as you are. Until next time.